Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you for one of my famed movie/Blu-ray reviews. Today I will be reviewing the movie and the Criterion Blu-ray release of Sisters. So I'll do the movie review, then I'll talk about the Criterion Blu-ray release. So my history with Sisters doesn't go very far back whatsoever. I saw it for the very first time over this past winter on streaming, being aware of the fact that it was on, I don't know when it came out on Criterion Blu-ray, maybe 18 or... Yeah, I looked at it, so it looks like the Blu-ray release is from 2018, so I've known that this was on Blu-ray, and I was able to see it for free on streaming over the winter. And honestly, when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not so sure. But obviously this time of year, if you know anything about Criterion Blu-ray releases and probably DVD and 4K, just Criterion in general, you can get titles for, select titles, most titles for 50% off. So I'm like, you know what, this might be fun to show Beth and, fun to own. So I snagged the Blu-ray release of, Criterion release of Sisters for $20. So that I saw it for a second time, and I'm a pretty big Brian De Palma fan. I haven't seen everything he's done, but this is definitely the most early, or the earliest Brian De Palma film I've seen. And I gotta tell you, right off the bat, it's so insane that they were able to get Bernard Herrmann to do the music, and I want to say it's possible that they worked together on more than just this movie. I could only assume that this is the first time Bernard Herrmann did music for a Brian De Palma movie. I would imagine he would continue to do so possibly until his passing. But right off the bat, I just don't want to forget to mention how it's so insane that Bernard Herrmann does the music for this. And honestly, quite honestly, I have to say the movie, and I don't have a problem with low budget movies, quite the contrary, but I will say that the music, when you compare it to like the music to the visuals in this movie, I mean, the music is just way too good for this movie, is basically what it boils down to. And I guess that's a good segue into my review of the movies. So this movie came out in 1973. Like I said, I think it's the earliest Brian De Palma movie I have seen at this point, starring Margot Kidder was quite the honey when she was younger. Holy cow! And does Brian De Palma screw every leading lady that he's worked with? Because as you may or may not know, he'd go on to also get married to and/or screw, get married to and presumably screw Nancy Allen as well. So I mean, how many of the women that are in his movies did he get to screw? But this movie basically stars, I don't know if Margot Kidder is the first billing, one would think so, but Margot Kidder, pre-Superman, pre-Lois Lane, but she was quite the honey back in the day. And honestly, she plays a French-Canadian character, and honestly, the French accent really goes with her face. She's got one of those faces that could be like, I think she is from Canada. She's got one of those faces that could be European or from France or whatever. So Margot Kidder doing the French accent, speaking English with the French accent, it really goes with her face, especially the young, super sexy version of her face that's featured in this movie. So I guess Brian De Palma, sometime before the production of this movie, had come across some blurb in a magazine or something about Siamese twins, and that planted the seed to do this movie. As you may or may not know, Brian De Palma is like this, huge Hitchcock fan. I want to say that he even took, briefly, or knew Hitchcock, or took classes that Hitchcock was teaching, or something like that. I'm pretty sure that they actually had some kind of, not collaboration, but, interpersonal connection. Was what, whether it seems to me, I could be wrong, but it seems to me De Palma, was a part of, some kind of course or something that Hitchcock was offering at some point. I don't really know, but whether that's true or not, one thing we do know is Brian De Palma obviously is a huge Hitchcock fan, and who can blame him? And a lot of his stuff echoes Hitchcock, and he, in a lot of ways, and it goes all the way up to Raising Cain. I don't know if he's really done anything like, a lot of his early work, and this included in Raising Cain and stuff after Raising Cain, because after Raising Cain he became, I guess, maybe a little more mainstream, and he, would go on to do Mission Impossible and and things. So I don't know if he really ever. I mean, I don't follow really Brian De Palma or what he's been doing since like the 21st in 21st century and stuff. But I'm not exactly sure if he's done anything like this since. But what he was doing a lot in his early years was like just like kind of what you'd call Hitchcockian stuff over and over. And one could obviously compare this to Psycho, and the same thing can be said for Dressed to Kill. And a lot of his movies are very, very much the same, different variations on the same thing, kind of like with early Dario Argento films as well. And one thing that's kind of a bummer about when I saw this for the first time over the winter and streaming for free is that, well, the same might not have happened if you'd seen this in '73, prior to seeing his later work. But obviously, being a fan of his later work, things like Dressed to Kill and Raising Cain and others that I'm a huge fan of Carrie as well, but Carrie isn't really like this with the twist, plot point or whatever. But being aware of some of his later work, I guessed right away the thing that was going on with this movie. And I'm not even going to spoil it in case you're watching this and haven't seen the film and don't want it spoiled. But we'll just simply say there's an old Brian De Palma twist, which I'm probably spoiling it now if if you're familiar with some of these early Brian De Palma movies. But right off the bat, I basically, and because I'm more familiar with some of his later stuff, I knew the twist right away. And it would be interesting to see this movie without seeing some of the later Brian De Palma movies, because maybe it'd be more of a like, whoa, that's a cool twist. But I still argue the way that some of the plot points are handled in the movie actually points to the fact that what ends up happening. It's hard to talk about it without spoiling it, but this movie's about Margot Kidder playing two parts, basically Siamese twins that were separated. I guess they were am I understanding correctly that they were living, joined for several, into adulthood and just recently got separated? I'm not exactly sure, having only seen this twice, but Margot Kidder plays, Siamese twins, and basically one of them's trying to live her life and more quote-unquote normal and happy, and the other one might be a little deranged or something. And it's really hard to review this without spoiling it, but it's a movie that, I guess for me, it's presented. It's like 90 minutes, and it's really exists in three distinct parts. Like the first 30 minutes, and is probably the most interesting. And I think for me, I'm not sure when the murder happens, but for me, it's like this movie really fits into thirds. Like the first 30 minutes, I think, is the most interesting. Then, the second 30 minutes less interesting, and the last 30 minutes even less interesting. And unfortunately for me, it does the exact opposite of what you kind of want to do, is, make things more interesting as the movie progresses in a perfect world. But, admittedly, this is one of his early films, and he's just starting, or he's in the process of, figuring out what he's doing and stuff. And like I say, if this movie, didn't have the Bernard Herrmann score, it'd be not necessarily. Honestly, why the hell did I buy this? I was just at Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, $20, go for it. I guess I kind of partly regret buying it, I guess. But in addition, this movie also features that goofy, was it Bill or William Finley, I want to say, the guy who was also in Eaten Alive and the Dracula part in the Funhouse Tobe Hooper movie, and kind of a goofy ass character. And it's really fun to see him, the younger version of him as well, and see him in a pretty decent, more or less sized role, because everything I'd seen him in up to that had always been more abbreviated. So this is the biggest part I think I've seen him in a movie that I can remember. And that guy is just a goofy guy. And also that one other guy, god dang it, I can't remember his name. Charles During, I think is possibly how you pronounce his name. He's a classic face from the 70s and the 80s, having grown up in the 70s and the 80s, mostly in the 80s. He's a face that you saw a lot of back in the day. He's also in this, and actually the woman who is like the news reporter. I mean, I don't think I've seen her necessarily in anything else at all. And for the record, I hate her hairstyle in this movie. I absolutely hate it. It's like 70s woman version of like a mullet or something. I just hate this woman's hair. But the movie, like I say, it's in, for me it's in three distinct parts. You've got like the most interesting part being the lead up to the murder and everything that happens there, and then this very much like, of course, it's so funny seeing Brian De Palma interviews and say, like, not agreeing with the fact that he's ripping off Hitchcock, and yet I don't know. I don't have a problem with him, quote unquote, ripping off Hitchcock. I mean, obviously, if someone is does stuff that's inspiring, obviously you're gonna lean towards, I mean, ripping off isn't maybe the best word, just making a movie in the vein of Hitchcock might be a better way to put it. But obviously there's a little bit of Rear Window in this movie. Once the murder is committed, this neighbor woman who's like across the way sees it basically from her window, and a little bit of Rear Window in this movie. And I gotta say though, I don't know if Brian De Palma pioneered the split screen or whatever, and I'm not exactly sure the split screen is even necessary. It's more like in this movie, it's more like they're just doing it because they can. I think that split screen was probably as he would go on to do other movies like Dressed to Kill and Carrie and stuff, or I should say Carrie and Dressed to Kill. Maybe the split screen was. And even Blowout, I think, did he do split screen in that? Probably. I think the split screen in those movies maybe is a little more warranted, whereas in this movie it's almost like not necessary. The part where you see the cameras in the victim's apartment, and then the other cameras in the person who's witnessing the murderer's apartment. That's a cool, to be able to see it from both angles at the same time. That I'll give him that's a cool split screen moment. I don't know. I mean, the split screen it's kind of like 3D in a way. It's like fun even if it's not necessary and stuff. And the way it's utilized later on is interesting. And you don't generally see two different angles at the same time in a movie. So that's kind of cool. Is it necessary? Not necessarily, but it's fun when you see split screen in these Brian De Palma movies. And like I say, I don't know if he pioneered it or who the hell pioneered it, or I don't know if this is his first split screen. I'm not, I don't know everything about Brian De Palma, but split screen is in this movie. So, trying to not go ridiculously long with this review, as I've already said, three distinct parts for me, everything leading up to the murder, and then the witness who's trying to, figure out the murder is like the second 30 minutes, and then the last 30 minutes, I guess, is just figuring out the situation that's going on with the Margot Kidder character and all the quote unquote possible or not intrigue that goes on, the mystery or whatever is going on with the Siamese twins character, and the reveal of what goes on with that at the end. It's strange, watching this again and kind of regretting buying it. It is strange that it'd be interesting to see if anyone in the comments has the same thoughts on just the inexplicable way the movie gets, in my opinion, less interesting as it wears on. And once again, that's kind of the opposite of what you generally like to do with the movie, or have a movie do as you watch it. But at least it starts strong versus some movies not having any strong parts at all, or whatever. Yeah, I kind of regret buying it, but $20, whatever. I guess that's kind of a weird review, but it's hard to review it in depth. I mean, you can't really review it in depth without spoiling it. So I guess that'll be basically my review about it. I keep coming back to wanting to just say the same things over and over. It doesn't blow my ass away. It is fun seeing William Finley, I want to say that is his name, in a bigger part that's not just an abbreviated walk-on part or small part or whatever, but it's cool to see younger Charles During and the sexy ass younger Margot Kidder right around the time of Black Christmas as well. And obviously, being a child of the 70s and the 80s, it's fun. With a movie like this, it's fun to just see the era represented in the movie. It starts with this fake ass TV show, and it's fun to see the way the TV shows were back then, and just all the cars and the fashions. I mean, this is like early 70s, so it's just, right after the 60s. And, even if the movie isn't necessarily interesting, with a movie like this, you can always enjoy the the cars and the fashions and be annoyed with the mullet, female-ish kind of mullet hairdo of that one actress who I really hated her frickin' hairstyle. I don't think I'm going to be able to go any higher than 2 stars out of 4 stars for Sisters. It starts really strong, like the opening credits with the, you know, like the feet, the super shots of the fetus, and you know, the Bernard Herrmann music is just like, wow, this is going to be amazing. But in my opinion, as it wears on, it's just kind of like becomes slower and slower. I mean, it could just be me, but if it is just me, it's just how I responded to the movie, and you know, it's pretty much the way I responded to it both times I watched it. So why did you buy it? Like I say, I guess yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. But now on to my review of the Criterion Blu-ray release that was released by Criterion. As we can see here, director-approved Blu-ray special edition features new 4K digital restoration approved by director Brian De Palma with uncompressed monorail soundtrack. New interview with actor. I don't know why this is this trend now to call actresses actors. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll just say new interview with actress Jennifer Salt. Interviews from 2004 with De Palma, Bill Finley, Charles During, Paul Hirsch, and Edward R. Pressman. Audio from 1973 discussion with De Palma at the American Film Institute. Appearance from 1970 by actress Margot Kidder on the Dick Cavett Show. Cavett, how do you pronounce his last name? Photo gallery and radio spots. You can read this other thing that talks about an essay. I never read that stuff. One thing that I can say about this Blu-ray release is if you're a fan of grain, you're in for a treat, and if you're not a fan of grain, you're going to be really disappointed by this release. It looks like it's filmed on 16mm. There's really actually, well, I guess I could look in the about the transfer. Yeah, I looked at the little booklet about the transfer, and this, I guess, was 35mm. The scan was taken off the original 35mm camera negative, so it's really strange to me. It's so frickin' grainy. You know, it looks exactly like 16mm. I'm not exactly sure why the 35mm movie looks so grainy, but I have no problem with it because I like grain. But I do say, you know, I do want to say that even if you do like grain as I do, it almost gets a little to be the point where it's a little much on this movie, and that's why I'm really surprised that it's 35mm. But at any rate, the transfer is really nice, color is really nice, contrast really nice, a lot of grain, almost to the point, and this is coming from a grain guy, a grain fan, a film grain fan. There's almost to every now and then, depending on what's on the screen or what's happening and stuff, maybe almost to the point of being a little too grainy here and there as well, but absolutely no problem. Of course, I've never experienced this movie any other way. Even when I watched that streaming version, it was probably the same scan, so I've never experienced this movie any other way, so I have nothing to compare it to. But even having nothing to compare it to, I can say this is a really stellar, I guess, 4K scan from the original camera negative. Talking about the audio, you know, obviously low-budget movie, 1973, it's going to be in mono. There's nothing that I can remember hearing in the audio track that is any kind of issues or any problems with the audio, so the audio sounded just fine to me. So we can definitely say the visual and audio aspects of this release are very well done. Features a 32-page booklet here with a whole lot to read. If you're a reader, I'm not really a reader, so I don't really read it, but I can say that on the cover here looks like there's basically a negative version of this image here. The Margot Kidder sisters, one of them more quote-unquote adjusted and normal, and another one more not so well adjusted and normal. Not a whole lot to show in the booklet, so I'm not going to show you any of the pages inside. Maybe you can see the pages elsewhere online, who the hell knows. On the inside there, if you take the booklet and the disc out, you can see the deranged sister with the knife and the goofy face coming at you in 2D. And this is what the disc looks like, and this is what the inside of the case looks like if the disc and the little booklet are in the case. Yeah, so maybe I kind of regret buying this, but whatever. Sisters, I guess there are worse movies out there and more expensive Blu-ray releases than this. So obviously, if you're a fan of the movie, this is one of the better versions of it you could own. I don't know if they put this out on 4K disc, but it is for sure out on Blu-ray disc. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video. So if you're a fan of this movie, obviously this is the way you're going to want to experience it. I don't know if this is If you're a fan of this movie, obviously this is going to be one of the best ways to experience it. I don't know if they put out a 4K disc of this title or not, but on Blu-ray, on normal Blu-ray, this is the best. Blah blah blah. I just created a word or a phrase there or something.